Hello and welcome to another TLDR US video. Last night in Washington, President Biden delivered his first address to Congress. Coming on the eve of his 100th day in office, the speech was structured as a reflection and a look forward, and centered around both concrete policy and abstract ideas, together crafting an image of an era of massive government expansion and investment. So today we're going to break down the most important parts of his speech and give you the highlights, as we move out of this beginning phase of the Biden presidency and into the daily politics of the next 4 years. Before we start, I am pleased to announce that because TLDR is growing, we're moving office into a new, bigger space. That means we have to move a lot of stuff though, so we're holding an office clearance sale. All of our merch is discounted, including all of our badges for only $3.99. But we're also selling office things like our sofa and our fridge. No, seriously, we're selling them. So check out the store if you want a pin or even our sofa. It's linked in the description. The address, we should note here, wasn't technically a State of the Union. Since the Reagan years, the president's first address to Congress has always just been a joint address, as, given that they just started, the president doesn't usually have a ton to discuss regarding the national state of affairs. But enough technicalities, let's get to the actual speech. Biden began, unsurprisingly, by discussing COVID, but not before paying his respects to various figures in his life and the American government, and especially to the two women behind him, Vice President Kamala Harris and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. While Pelosi has filled the speaker's chair behind presidents before, this is the first time that both of the chairs behind the president have been occupied by women. Biden acknowledged this by nodding to the historic nature of Vice President Harris's position before moving on to the address itself.
Anyway, thank you all. Madam Speaker, Madam Vice President. No president has ever said those words from this podium. No president has ever said those words. And it's about time.
Biden framed the beginning of his coronavirus discussion around the idea of crisis and opportunity, focusing on his campaign promise to build back better. The president touted his recently passed American Rescue Plan and some of the plethora of measures contained within it. He also emphasized the nation's vaccine success, including a call for every American to get the vaccine ASAP.
90% of Americans now live within 5 miles of a vaccination site. Everyone over the age of 16, everyone is now eligible to get vaccinated right now, right away. Go get vaccinated, America.
Throughout the coronavirus discussion, he repeatedly emphasized the human tragedy, frequently telling stories of individual people and the hardships they've had to endure. It was, fittingly for a pandemic that's killed more than 500,000 Americans, one of the most somber parts of his address.
Grandparents hugging their children and grandchildren instead of pressing hands against a window to say goodbye. It means everything. Those things mean everything. You know, there's still, you all know it, you know it better than any group of Americans, there's still more work to do to beat this virus.
Biden then moved into a discussion of infrastructure and his proposed American Jobs Plan, the $2 trillion infrastructure and spending bill he introduced earlier. He put a specific focus on the climate side of job growth in America, describing the solutions to the climate crisis very explicitly in terms of jobs and economic growth.
For too long, we've failed to use the most important word when it comes to meeting the climate crisis: jobs. The American Jobs Plan will put engineers and construction workers to work building more energy-efficient buildings and homes. Electrical workers, IBEW members installing 500,000 charging stations along our highways. There is simply no reason why the blades for wind turbines can't be built in Pittsburgh instead of Beijing.
He also put emphasis on his Buy American policy, attempting to reverse what is increasingly viewed as a crisis of outsourcing to other countries. He also heaped historic praise on unions, crediting them as being the backbone of the middle class, which itself he credited with being the backbone of America as a whole. Finishing out the jobs and economic side of his address, Biden asked Congress to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, emphatically taking a side on the ongoing battle over the federal minimum.
Let's raise the minimum wage to $15. No one working 40 hours a week. No one working 40 hours a week should live below the poverty line.
Biden's next big part of the speech was centered around his American Families Plan, a piece of recently proposed legislation focused on education, poverty reduction, and economic mobility. But before we get there, he took a quick moment to address more briefly a few smaller but still significant points. Most notably, the president advocated for the creation of an advanced research arm of the National Institute of Health, focused on developing solutions and cures for cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and other major health issues. This is an area of particular personal importance to Biden, who lost his son Beau to brain cancer in 2015.
I'll still never forget when we passed the cancer proposal the last year as vice president. Almost $9 million going to NIH. And if you excuse the point of personal privilege, I'll never forget you standing, Mitch, and saying, name it after my deceased son. It meant a lot. But so many of us have deceased sons, daughters, and relatives who died of cancer.
Emphasizing the degree to which cures for these diseases are within grasp, Biden urged bipartisanship and cooperation. He also praised bipartisanship more generally, pledging to negotiate, work, and compromise with Republicans, though drawing a line in the sand at the same time, reminding Congress members on the right that he would leave them behind if they put their foot down on everything.
Vice President Harris and I met regularly in the Oval Office with Democrats and Republicans and discussed the jobs plan. And I applaud a group of Republican senators who just put forward their own proposal. So let's get to work. I wanted to lay out before the Congress my plan before we got into the deep discussions. But the rest of the world is not waiting for us. I just want to be clear. From my perspective, doing nothing is not an option.
Moving into the heart of the family's plan, Biden made clear that though he wants bipartisanship, he's also setting out an ambitious agenda. He called for paid family leave and medical leave, 2 years of free community college, 2 years of free pre-K, and an expansion of the recently beefed up child tax credit through 2025. He also took aim at the eternally complicated issue of healthcare policy, advocating for lower insurance costs and cheaper drug prices, with particular emphasis on letting Medicare negotiate with drug companies, a policy that Democrats have long sought as a way of dragging down some of the high drug prices through market forces. At one point, the president, who was once nearly ran out of the Democratic Party for being too moderate on healthcare, proclaimed that healthcare is a right.
The Affordable Care Act has been a lifeline for millions of Americans, protecting people with pre-existing conditions, protecting women's health, and the pandemic has demonstrated how badly it's needed. This is all about a simple premise. Health care should be a right, not a privilege in America.
Earning the angry glares of Republicans seated in the chamber, as well as, presumably, a gruff smile from Senator Sanders. In the last section of the speech, Biden discussed briefly a number of topics which he's put on the back burner recently, but evidently hopes to bring to the front in the coming months, including immigration, gun reform, voting rights, and racial justice. Biden promised work, often vocally hoping for bipartisanship on various aspects of these issues, but racial justice in particular drew strong words from the president, with him promising to pass criminal justice and racial equality legislation by May 25th, the anniversary of George Floyd's death.
We have to come together to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the people they serve, to root out systemic racism in our criminal justice system, and to enact police reform in George Floyd's name that passed the House already. I know Republicans have their own ideas and are engaged in very productive discussions with Democrats in the Senate. We need to work together to find a consensus. But let's get it done next month, by the first anniversary of George Floyd's death.
In concluding his address, Biden brought the nation's memory back to the insurrection of January 6th. In doing so, he called on America to stand in unity against the forces that may tear it apart, be they internal or external, to prove that democracy is still the wholly powerful idea of the country. Biden's final words, though, were the words he uses to finish many major speeches.
God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you for your patience.
Let us know what you think of Biden's joint address and the policies that he's been rolling out. And be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a new video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.